My goodness, Teresa, how do you go anywhere from there? My name's Polly Pistol, and I'm an alcoholic. By God's grace, in a program called Alcoholics Anonymous, I haven't had a drink since April the 11th of 1977. And for that, I am eternally grateful. I have a home group, and that's the West Connect group in Jacksonville, Florida. We meet on Sunday night at 6 o'clock and on Monday night at 7 o'clock. And if you're ever in Jacksonville, we invite you to our meeting. I have a sponsor. Her name is Rena Kay. She has a sponsor, and her sponsor has a sponsor, and I sponsor, and the women I sponsor, and so on and so forth. And we're an active gang of women. That's what we are. We just love the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And Allie, I'm so thank you for asking me to come back here again. Thank you. And I have my mentor on here, Mildred F. I tell you, Mildred is she has given her life to this program. And I just, I have the privilege to have been up close and personal. I've even slept in her bed. And it's all, it's just, these are the kind of things you get to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And you get to go stay with people, and you get to be real personal. And for that, I'm just so happy. I've got a sponsee on here, and I'm just looking around at the people that I have so much admiration for. Teresa, the White brothers, we got two White brothers on, and I just always love that. And it's just, when I get on some of these, I get to miss Southern California a lot, and the things that, you get to see people, and but Zoom has just been amazing. And again, Ollie, thank you so much. I'm not exactly sure how I do this, but I was asked, I can't remember from the last time, because I'm an old lady and you put all those other things in front of me, all those other meetings, and I forgot that meeting, this meeting. So you asked me to pick out a line in those 2 pages. And so what I did is a line in step 11 that is really, really important to me, and it was good for me to be able to do it, is we come to rely on it. And that's what has happened. The longer I stay in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, the more I rely on it. And I know that a lot of us who are getting up in age, we really rely on it. Sometimes I just feel like, the older I get, I feel like the harder God holds me up, and the more that He helps me do what I need to do, and is there every minute, and especially gives me the strength that sometimes I don't even think I have. I've had to catch my husband. I've had to pick him up, and I weigh like 110 pounds, and he weighs 200. And God gives you strength that you don't even know you have. And I have been able to experience that more and more, and see these things as I'm walking this walk in my life. And it's amazing that I get to be at this place in my life, and I get to experience what I'm experiencing. And a lot of times we get to rely upon it. We get to know without a shadow of a doubt that God's there, no matter what. Doesn't matter how bad it gets or how hard it looks, and thinks, oh, we just can't do this. There's just no way I can do this. And, you just find the strength to do it. And I think about when this is not the first husband that I've had that is ill. My first husband was ill. The difference was, as I was a practicing alcoholic, and I was incapable of caring for him. I was incapable. And there's some people on this meeting, and Teresa being one, and some of the others that knew my sponsor, Dottie Harris, and that knew her up close and personal, and the kind of spirit she had, and the kind of program that she walked. And my first sponsor was a man in Hertz, Texas, right outside of Fort Worth, Texas. He was my first sponsor. I've had 3 sponsors in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've had Frank, who I had until I moved to Southern California. And then I had Dottie. And Dottie was my sponsor for 33 years until the day she died. And today I have Rena Keene. And Rena is an amazing sweetheart, just like Dottie was such a sweetheart. And Dottie, when I got Dottie came from such a spiritual place. She was a walking step 11. She was an absolutely walking step 11. She just had quite a bit of hardships in her life. And what I got to do is I got to see her walk through those hardships. And she did it with grace and dignity and blamed no one for her plot in life and what happened. And those are the things that I just so remember. And when she started sponsoring me, I was 5 years sober. And Dave and I had moved to Southern California. And I had heard Dottie speak in Austin, Texas. And I said, if I'm ever anywhere where that lady is, I'm going to ask her to sponsor me. And lo and behold, when I was 5 years sober, Dave and I had been married 2 years. And when I was 5 years sober, Dave took a job in Southern California. And when we got to Southern California, the job was in Santa Monica, and we went there. And as soon as we got into town, into the hotel, I called the intergroup office and I asked if they had a phone number for Dottie Harris. And they said they did. They gave me the number. I called her. And she told me to meet her Monday night at the Bellflower Big Book. And I met her, and I had coffee with her the next day, and I asked her to sponsor me, and she sponsored me until the day she died. And Dottie had the most beautiful relationship with God. She had such a sweet, sweet God. And I had come from a man named Frank Fitzpatrick. And I mean, you can't make up a story like this. This man was director of a detox center that my husband took me to. I knew nothing about AA. And I certainly felt like once I came to and walked into the day room of that detox center and saw those people sitting there, I definitely knew I did not belong. I did not belong with these people. I am not like these people. And that's the kind of attitude I had. And it wasn't, you stay in detox if you were 36 years old, which I was. You stay in detox for a while, and pretty soon you start to clear up. And the first thing that comes alive is your libido. And then I look around that detox center, and all of a sudden, those guys look a lot better than when I first got there. And I got 12 stepped after a little altercation by Frank, who is the director of that detox center. He rescued me really out of a motel room and brought me back into that treatment center. And I owe my life to him. I absolutely owe my life to him. And he started working with me and became my first AA sponsor. And what happened is he got sober at Long Beach Naval Hospital, and Frank Honeycutt, who would become my mentor and just my everything, him and Dottie. And he was sponsored by Frank Honeycutt. And I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is like God paved a road that I had no idea was being paved. And it started in Hearst, Texas. And it went all the way to California. And it was just this amazing thing. And then when I met Dottie and I asked her to sponsor me, I came up against the sweetest woman I had ever met. And she had a God that was so, so sweet. And one of the things that I had such a hard time with, and what step 11 is, for me, is all about forgiveness. It's all about forgiveness. And I knew nothing about forgiveness. How do you forgive? How do you be forgiven when you have been an abusive mother? And Frank Fitzpatrick, who was my first sponsor, was the first person to say to me, I knew it in my head. I knew it. But he was the first person when we sat down, when I finished reading him my fourth step, he was the first person that said to me, Polly, you are a child abuser and you're going to have to make amends to those boys. And not knowing how do you do that. And Frank walked me through that and helped me with making amends to my boys. And there's nothing in AA to this day, that has ever been anything any harder than that day I met my two boys. My boys were 16 and 14 years old. And for me to meet them and make amends to them. And I had two angry young men in front of me. They were 16 and 14 years old. And my youngest one screamed at me and he says, what are you going to say to me that's ever going to make it right? And so because what happens is I get, people say you're so sweet and you're so kind, but you put alcohol in me and I change. I am one of those people that changes, and I become a personality that is mean and usually the only thing that I harm are my two sons. That's who I harm. And that's who I get angry at. And it was a bad scene. And I am very neglectful. I do not only harm them by hitting them, screaming at them, but what I do is from a very young age, I neglect them. And they have to take care of themselves. So when I got sober, my sons weren't impressed at all about my sobriety. Oh, goody, now what? And they weren't the least bit impressed. And I will tell you a miracle story before I get through with this share today, but which is I come to rely upon it. And so what has happened is Dottie gave me her God. And what her God did for me is her God let me repeat, as Dottie said, for correction. God lets us do do-overs. And what I was able to do was to repeat for correction. And I have got to do a lot of do-overs. And that has been something that has saved my life. I've got to become the mom I always wanted to be. That one happened pretty late. But most of all, I have 5 grandchildren, and I have been able to be the grandmother. I was able to take care. My sons would leave me for a week at a time and go on vacation. They would leave their children with me. That's how much I was trusted after what I had done. That's what AA did. AA gave my sons the kind of trust that they would leave their children with me. So I've got to know a lot about step 11 and how God can truly work in our lives and how God can change everything that can. Absolutely. So if we, the step says sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And what I have learned is that His will for us is everything that is good for us. God wants everything that is good for us. And God has been so good to me and has had so much repairing. My youngest son got sober, and when he was 21 years old, he got sober. And James and I have been able to walk this walk together for 38 years. I have been able to share this program with my son. And those of you who know James and know who he is and know Jane, know that they love AA and that they will do anything for this program, absolutely anything. And it's been an amazing journey. 5 years ago, well, it's 6 now. Time goes by faster than I can think. Dave got sick. And not only did Dave get sick and our life changed as a couple, but our whole life changed. I had, I tell you, I had the most amazing, I got to do things in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have had the most amazing life in Alcoholics Anonymous. Mildred Frank, who is on this, is just she is such a mentor of mine, and she's such a good friend, and she's such a good example. She's a mentor, all of the things anybody good can call about her, she is. And I get to share that with her. And I just think that and we're not kidding, but I say we are such good friends. I went to visit Mildred and we slept in the same bed. That's what we did. I didn't want to sleep on the sofa. I didn't want to do any of that. It was just amazing to be able to share that weekend with her and some of the people she sponsors, and to be able to do so many meditations with her. And these are the things that we get to do when we meet special people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I just feel so blessed. And 6 years ago, Dave got sick, and a lot of things stopped for me. And one of the things that stopped was I couldn't go places and I couldn't do the things that I used to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm telling you, I had a run. I had a run in AA. I'm telling you, it was fun. I went places. I got to share places. I got to do workshops. I mean, we just got to do all kinds of fantastic things. And I mean, I would get somebody to say, we're going to do this workshop. and I'd go, well, what's that about? Just kind of like I did to Allie today. Well, what am I supposed to do? And you just do it. And you come to just ask God to show me what to do, and you come to rely on He's going to put something in your mouth. And I come to rely on that. I come to count on it, because in and of myself, I can't do it. And I know I can't. So, but I know that if I let God move in, that I can do it. And I can get the courage to do, because I've never gotten over, those of you who's talk, I don't know about you, but I've never gotten over having those butterflies so bad before you start, you can't even feel like you're not going to be able to open your mouth. And I still have that. But I come to rely on that, and being able to walk. I feel like I've been able to walk with giants. I've been able to walk with giants. I was brand new in sobriety. I'd moved to Southern California. I'd asked Dottie to sponsor me. And the next thing I'm doing is sitting at Chuck Chamberlain's living room on the floor, because everybody 5 years and under had to sit on the floor. I'm being able to sit. How does that happen? I don't even know what's going on. And and that happens. I don't even know what's happening. And these are the things that have happened in my life. I have just been given so many blessings. And Dave got sick 6 years ago, and Dave had lung cancer, and it didn't look so bad. And they took out his upper left lobe, and it looked like everything was fine, and we were done with lung cancer, and he was going to go on about his business. And then he fell, and he got to where he couldn't walk anymore. And the next thing we know, he's having a back surgery. And then they find out that that's not working, and he has another back surgery. And then after that's over, then he's got bladder cancer, and he's having bladder cancer surgery. And then he's having another bladder cancer surgery. And then when he was, I guess it's been 3 years ago, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And that's been the one. That's been the deal. And that has slowly debilitated him. And you don't think this is ever going to happen. Those of you who knew Dave knows that Dave was a rock climbing, backpacking, kayaking. This was the kind of guy. He was like an outdoors guy. He loved to live in tents, and he'd just say, "You go do all the AA conferences you're going to do. I'm going to Yosemite for the month." And that's the kind of thing he did. And to see this has been very, very painful. But you know what? God gives you whatever you need. And thank God, I hadn't been able to do much AA. I couldn't travel anymore. And lo and behold, the next thing I know, we've got a pandemic. And before we know it, we have Zoom. And I love Zoom. I couldn't believe what we got to do. We got to get on here, and before we knew it, AA was all over the world. We didn't have to get on an airplane and go. We just got on our TV and we were there. We were there, and it has just been phenomenal. And for me, I don't know for anybody else here, but my AA program has never been better. And the reason is I've never, ever done so many meetings. And this is my third meeting today. And this is not unusual for me to do 2 or 3 meetings a day. And what happens is it's different things. Today it's step 11. And it's step 11 on pages 86 to 88. It's that meat right there that I feel like is in step 11. It's just the meat. It tells us after we're going to do our nightly review. It tells us just what to do when we lay down at night. And then it tells that we're going to make the nightly review. And then we ask God what we should do if we've left anything out. And then the next morning it says on awakening, and it tells us what to do. And on awakening, I do pretty much the very same thing that Frank taught me 44 years ago. When I sat in his living room and he did the steps with me, I do pretty much the same thing that he told me to do. I say pretty much this. I have been reading. I always say this because Emmett Fox was such a contributor to Alcoholics Anonymous. But I've been reading around the year with Emmett Fox since I got sober. And I can't put it down. It just seems like it's just like kind of like the big book. It's just part of me. And I read that every single day. And it's just being able to sit and read those readings and upon awakening, ask God to direct my thinking, to tell me what am I to do today. And some days are hard. Some days are real hard. And, some days get real hard and it hadn't happened in a while, but I think about when Dave has fallen and I've had to call an ambulance and the ambulance goes and I have to follow the ambulance and I'm crying all the way to the hospital because I'm not in there with him. I've got to drive there. And, and we get through those things and we just keep taking the next step forward, and how God helps us and how God sends people to help us, how God gives us. I have a sponsee that sat by my side for 3 years. That's how long she sat by my side. So we have people that are there that help us in those times of need. What it says in step 11 is one of the things that I think is the biggest promise. And thinking about our day ahead, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought, or a decision. And what happens is, if we ask, we receive. We can make decisions and have an intuitive thought that you think, God, where did that come from? Where did that come from? And we get this intuitive thought, and we relax and be able to take it easy. We don't struggle. And this is the words I love. We are often surprised how the right answers come after we have tried this for a while. Just to count on it, to just be able to count on, if I just say those prayers and I just sit back and I just relax and I let God take over, to find out that it is amazing what happens. It's amazing how God comes to our rescue. What used to be a hunch or an occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. Being still inexperienced. Let me see what I'm doing here on time. Okay. Let's see. Being still inexperienced and have just made conscious contact with God, it is not probable that we are going to be inspired at all times. We might pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. But I also think those absurd actions and ideas turn to be fabulous lessons and teachers of their own. We get to learn from those mistakes and those things that we do. Nevertheless, we find that our thinking will be, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of an inspiration. We come to rely on it. And that's what I don't know where I would be spiritually today had Dave not gotten so sick. I don't know where I'd been. I'm sure that I would still be packing my suitcase and running all over the world because I loved it. I loved meeting all the people. I loved it. I loved seeing things. I never got tired. I'd get off an airplane. Maybe I wouldn't even get into Los Angeles. And sometimes your plane's late. And sometimes I would even get there till Monday morning. And fortunately, I worked right up on El Segundo, not far from LAX. And I just got in my car and went to work because I didn't have time to go home. I didn't have time to do anything. I barely made it to work and sometimes was late. But I knew that I had to get to my job, that I could not use AA for my job. I had to get to my job and make sure I did my job. And I was always able to do that. And you get energy, you get whatever you need. I've learned in my life that if I'm willing to show up and I'm just willing to do it, I get all the energy I need. And that is another thing I've come to rely on, that I know God will give me what I think I don't have, that I don't have it, but He'll give it to me. He gives me all I need. We usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer, that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be, that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. We ask especially for freedom from self-will and are careful to make no requests for ourselves only. We may ask for ourselves, however, if others will be helped. And these are places in the big book that I read all the time. While I have the podium here, I'm going to share some miracles. I have, during this pandemic, have experienced a lot of miracles. And they have been miracles I never saw coming. And Dave has been sick since December of 2015. And through this, I have had a woman that stayed by my side. And she stayed by my side, and Dave was 3 years into this. And he ended up, and he was really bad, and it looked like he was in the hospital. It looked like he probably wasn't going to get through about a pneumonia. And he finally got some better. Well, Medicare, when you run out of your days in the hospital, then you have to go to a nursing home. They call it a rehab, but it's a nursing home. And he was taken to that nursing home. And he was in a really, really bad way. I mean, he was really bad. And he wasn't getting any better. And Vicki said to me, she said, "Polly, can I ask Gary to come pray for Dave?" And Gary is her minister. And I said, "Oh, please ask Gary to come pray for Dave." And Gary started coming to the hospital and praying for Dave. And Dave was in the hospital for 30 days. And Gary came 15 of those days, just every other day, to see Dave. And then Vicki asked me, she says, "Polly, would you like to go to church with me?" And I said, "Yes, I'd like to go to church with you." And I went to church with her, and I walked into that church, and I felt like God had I absolutely had a spiritual experience going into that church. Now, I was very reluctant to go to the church because this was a Southern Baptist church, and that church was on every one of my inventories. I had such a resentment against the Baptist church. And I went to that church, and what happened is all of that went away That church was nothing like the church that I remember. I mean, a lot of things are different today. It's not anything like the church I remember. And the biggest joke that God has played on Dave and I is today that Dave and I are members of Southside Baptist Church. And then another miracle was performed where we met our AA group and our West Connect group met in a church. During the pandemic, that church didn't open, but Southside Baptist Church was open. And today, West Connect meets in Southside Baptist Church. It's just unbelievable. And then the other miracle, I have an older son. A lot of you hear me talk about James, and James is in the program. Well, my oldest son really wanted to have nothing to do with AA and pretty much didn't have a lot to do with me. And he and I had a very hard relationship. And all I've done is continued to, take care of my grandchildren and stuff when I lived in Southern California. Then when we moved to Birch Bay, Washington, I came home twice a year to see my son in California. My son and Chicago would come to us to be, and see us. And I continued to see my son. However, he never made any effort to see me, didn't want to make any effort to see me. Maybe he did, but he didn't. And 3 years ago, this is the whole time this time was happening, stuff was happening with Dave. Dave was in the nursing home even. And my son called me on the phone and he said, "Mom, I'm going to rehab." And I was like, what? I mean, it just, that whole drinking scene was totally hidden from me. And what is amazing is that I know that there are people on these Zooms, there are hurting people with people they love and their kids, their grandkids. And I hurt. My heart broke. I tried to have a relationship with my son, and I just couldn't have a relationship with my oldest son. And there always was this wedge between us. And on March 8th, I know the date totally. It was right before we shut down for the pandemic. And I was in Southern California visiting my son. I go out there every year to visit him. I was there visiting him, and I'd gone to a meeting with him on Sunday night. And we got out of that meeting, and I was getting ready to be taken to a hotel by LAX because I was flying out the next day. And my son just wrapped his arms around me, and he just said, "Mom, I love you." And I knew that everything that had been between us was gone, because you see, that big wedge that was between us was alcoholism. And Russ now has 3 years of sobriety. He's 61 years old. And and he has 3 years of sobriety. And I can tell you that it's one of my biggest things right now is it's in God's time. It's in God's time. I have asked God for as long as I have been in AA to help me have a relationship with my oldest son, to just help heal. And I know where the abuse was and all this stuff that has happened to him as a child. He got it more than anybody. He got it. And he's one of these kids. James can't remember anything, and Russ hasn't forgotten a thing. So it was just, it was just, I know he has a lot of memories, and they're not pleasant. And but what is happening is it's God's timing. It's just God's timing. And I never knew that I would see it. And but I can tell you that my relationship with him, we talk on the phone, and today he tells me he loves me and says, and he calls me. He never called me. He calls me. It's just, I mean, life is amazing. And I would have never, I just, you know, you never know. You never know what's going to happen. But I'm just, you know, it's one of those miracles that I'm just so glad that I didn't miss the miracle. And I'm so glad that I did what Dottie told me. She said, never, you don't ever stop. Don't wait for him to do anything. You just don't ever stop. You just don't ever stop. And I never stopped. I never stopped. And by God's grace, I have been able to experience that miracle. So God's been busy in my life during the pandemic and given me a lot of blessings and a lot of awakenings. And, you know, sometimes we think we hang around here so long that we just dry up and blow away. But, you know, what happens is that God just can, if we'll just keep going, if we'll suit up and show up, God keeps presenting himself. And I'm just grateful that I've been able to stay close to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and be here and be active and I'm glad Zoom, when we couldn't go to live meetings, gave us a way to be active and never get stale. In fact, if you guys are like me, you're doing more meetings than you ever did in your life. And it's just fabulous. It's just like you can't do enough of them. I get to see people I haven't seen for years. I see Teresa a lot, and I lived in Southern California, and I didn't see her that much. And it's just amazing. And Ollie, I just thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share at your meeting. Thank you.